Let's talk about the competency of curiosity. Curiosity has played a huge part in my career and a huge part in the building of Service Express, which is the art of just being curious, asking questions. Why do we do that? What could we do? What would it look like? How do we do it better? As we've grown in my 25 years here, double digits every year, we always have to be thinking about how do we scale, how do we grow, how do we do it better, more efficiently, make it easier for our employees, make it better for our customers, and so forth. And so it's really something that I believe you can create and drive into your own organization. And there's a few key things to hone in on that. So one is shaking the thinking. So how do you do that? Well, it starts with the C-suite, starts with the top of the organization. The fish stinks from the head down. So it starts with me as the CEO, with my executive team. All right, we have to cast a vision of it is okay to question everything that we're doing. Now, it doesn't mean just start ripping things out and make radical changes all over the place, but should always be thinking, why do we do it that way? Is that still the best way to do it? Is there a better way to do it? What would it look like if we did it differently? So we got to cast a vision. We have to make it okay for people within the organization to take risks, right? So you do have to say, test that out. Take a risk and try something different. We don't do wholesale changes across the board, but we look at certain areas, we test new ideas. That's the other part. Test new ideas. Don't just make wholesale changes, and if that doesn't work, you've disrupted the whole organization, and then try something different. Test out the new ideas. So you have to think about, how would we measure success and its impact? How will we know if it's working? How will we know if it's failing? How do we test and measure and make the changes that are necessary, and then keep making progress along the way? Celebrate the failures. It's okay to fail. You really have to model this at the highest levels of the organization. If you tell them to think differently and test new ideas, and they do that and they fail, and you crush them for it, you're going to crush the whole morale and they won't do it again. You can't say, try new things and try to do it differently, and then when you fail, beat them up over it. It does not work. They won't do it anymore, and you'll lack trust on that. And then applaud the risk takers. For the ones who are trying new ideas, the ones who did fail, the ones who are learning and growing, applaud that. Celebrate the failures, because it's learning, right? Failure is only failure if you didn't learn. So celebrate it and then recalibrate and go forward. And when you think you have the right idea, test it out, and then you can scale it out across the organization. And the other thing is encourage people to ask, like to rethink the model. And the way you do that is you ask big what if questions. What if we did this? What if it looked like that? What if we could do it that way? Whether you can or you can't, right? You're not deciding that right away. You're just saying, what if? And then we have a phrase around Service Express that came from our Chief Operating Officer, John Madden, who says, what would you have to believe then? What if we could do that? And what would you have to believe for that to be true? Because you'll get a lot of people say, oh, we can never do that. That wouldn't work. How could that scale? It wouldn't work. And say, stop worrying about, because we're not actually doing it yet. We're just thinking. But what would you have to believe for this to work? And then it starts coming together. And then you start collaborating and brainstorming and putting together a plan that then you can think about where to test it. And then you can measure the results. Applaud the failure if you fail. Because the more often you do the failure, the more you'll learn, you recalibrate, and the more you will win. So it all goes together. So curiosity is a competency. There's a way to get it into your organization. I've given you a few ideas here. Test them out and let me know what you think.